So all this new leadership took their place. And the reason why I realized it actually ties into here is because the new leadership, or at least one of them, and I do not remember her name at all, apparently got offended by something I said and called a couple of months ago. This happened roughly 3 to 4 months ago, and the Bible study itself caused some issues where she had an Asian guy. I don't know who he was, and it took me about 5 minutes to understand what he was saying and why he was trying to call me, because I was about ready to go block him, which I did at the very end anyway, once I found out what it was about. And talking about some of these issues, in specific, the lesson that they were talking about, which has been covered numerous times by anyone who has ever gone to church, Bathsheba bathing on top of, where she went on top of the roof to go bathe. And it was not specifically about that, it was about women in the Bible. And when she popped up because she's one of the women, the more popular women in the Bible that was talked about. I talked about two things before the lesson itself ended and I jumped in. The first one was basically, where's Queen Esther? Why is she not talked about? Because Queen Esther did a lot for her people, and she was Jewish, by the way, if you don't remember. And honestly, it's one of the more interesting and cool stories that you can listen to on how, what the interaction is like. And in the end, she basically, everything turned out well in the end, and quote unquote the bad guy got killed, and basically got killed by his own devices. But the other part about Queen Bathsheba is the part that apparently caused issues, because when they brought that up, I was like, well, here's the thing. You know, or maybe not, but you probably have heard the fact that when she went up on top of there, that she did so to go purposely attack, to attract the attention of King David, because she wasn't really happy with her husband. People were, they were smiling, or, probably thinking I was joking or something. But I basically went on to say that, well, right after the whole, she probably wasn't happy with her husband, and she was trying to go attract King David, which, she was successful. And that's pretty much when I got cut off. And afterwards, about a day or two later, I was called by the Asian guy and asked to, I was not welcome there at the Bible study anymore. Please do not come back. And I was like, well, according to my conversation with the female admin who took the place of the older church members, and I don't even know her age or anything like that. I really don't know. She's probably, I did see her because I think she sat down at the table that we were at. By the way, I was being completely respectful. But I want to finish this up, wrap this up, and talk about two more things about this. But the conversation that I did talk to her about, and I was bringing up some very good points, and I asked if he was aware of them and if they were talked about at all. He basically said no and just kept right going to his own point. So at that point, I was like, well, alright. I just hung up and blocked him, and that was pretty much it. I sent a message before blocking him saying I do not appreciate the conversation and basically being ignored. And then I blocked him. I don't even know who he was, and that was the strangest thing, because there were no Asians at all in this Bible study who were on a leadership position that I was aware of. So if there were, I don't remember seeing anyone there. Very unusual. Anyway, the new leadership in some of the churches, I'm wondering about, because of the situation, if they're being replaced by more females and women, because if you're not aware, there's many men who stepped away from church. And if men men are stepping away from the church, who's going to replace that? Who's going to take their spot and step up? It's probably going to be the women and older men up until they retire, like actually retire from everything. Because if I'm 35 and the older men of previous generations are going to be in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, realistically speaking. Many of the older men are married. Not all, but the ones who are specifically going to church. And for all intents and purposes here, if the new leadership is being replaced by women, that is definitely something to pay attention to, possibly to worry about. Because women normally have trouble dealing with issues and problems. MGTOW is one of those solutions and answers to one of the problems that I was talking about in the last video, that is being labeled as misogynistic and hatred against men. There's just a lot of division, a lot of problems where men and women are both being pointed at as perpetrators and part of a bigger problem. It's doing nothing but causing more problems, because when you start pointing out some of the issues and problems, many people have simply jumped and started pointing fingers at the other sex, saying like, well, the problem's all them. Pointing fingers is not the answer. It just makes things worse. And MGTOW, I don't like it, but being reminded of, reprioritizing yourself, being reminded that there are other goals in life besides marriage, family, and kids, being reminded and helping to reprioritize, helping others to basically putting stuff in front of the other people, in front of yourself, in front of myself, to go reprioritize and focus on something else other than family, kids, and a wife is incredibly important. And as a veteran, that is one of the hardest things to do, is to shift your focus from a military mindset to a civilian one, because there's a lot of people who get lost in the transition, and there are a lot of veterans who end up committing suicide. A lack of a goal, a lack of a focus contributes to that. Lack of friends and lack of family also contributes to that as well. And being single, the older you get, the worse the issue does become. And that's simply because you don't get as many opportunities, or you get less of the same opportunities that you got while growing up. School is completely out of the question, unless you're going to go back to college, and even then, from what I'm hearing now, it's best to avoid. Trade school might be different than college, though, so there might be some hope there. I'm not sure. I've been thinking about doing something like that for a year or two now. something else. I'm not sure. Maybe they're running tight on money. I don't know. But some of these issues are just simply not being taken care of, and I just simply had to be like, you know what? I stopped caring, because if I care anymore, I'm going to end up causing more health issues and concerns. So I'm done. And that's when I realized this whole asshole thing is basically, that's where a lot of guys, like, they don't care. It's because it gets stressful. I grew up in a Christian family, so that whole asshole mentality and all that is not something I was ever familiar with. I saw it in the military, dealt with it, but understanding it, that's different. So, moving on. You don't see stuff like MGTOW and all that in church and anywhere. And I've never seen anywhere, literally, outside of, it's never been outside of YouTube. I mean, there are other people that bring stuff in that you might see glimpses of, you know, like pointing out for dangers and warning signs, but that's about it. I want to say, though, back before Hammerhead got his, you know, his first channel deleted, before it was gone and went, you know, bye-bye, and everything was lost, there was a particular topic that was talked about, and I remember putting something down because it got pointed out, and it ended up pissing some people off. And I basically explained how before MGTOW came out, I was already I was focusing on the best for my life. And I would have to say, if you focus on having the best and then being the best in your life, that's almost the same thing as putting yourself first and working on your career and all that. I will say that on a Christian side of things, or on a faith-based side of things, focusing on the best will eventually take you away from God. The focus will shift from God to yourself. And there are issues that do happen when that pops up, but I'm not going to be talking about it other than just this whole pre-MGTOW thing, because it's a very interesting notion that does kind of exist up until all of this happened in the past couple of years. So I lived basically my whole life wanting the best, and then realizing some of the steps that need to happen there. If you want the best, you got to be the best. I've had that mindset for years now. I've had that understanding for years. Now, continuing on, the older generation is passing away, retiring, or focusing on family, or moving out of the picture in some other aspects. I've got a friend of mine who's buying up land, and he's moving to a remote part of the country, and he's not checking out, he's just, it's part of his life that he's changing. He's going a different direction in life, and him and I have had some very good conversations. One 4-hour conversation a couple weeks ago, and probably about 5 days ago, we've had another 3-hour discussion, and it was good. He really actually thanked me afterwards for it. I'm very surprised. I appreciate it, I really do. Being able to have in-depth conversations about some very real stuff that would get you someone that you can accurately rely on. The Bible may say that a friend sticks closer than a brother, but I have to wonder about that at times. I really do. Considering one of my brothers has passed away and the other one is a bit of a... I'm not really sure. I'm really not. But he's up in Pennsylvania. Church is going out of the picture more or less. There's a lot of leadership changes that have been made last year with many of the other businesses, if you're not aware. A lot more electronic changes, doing services online. It was basically coming down to, if you're not changing up what your method, you're dying. It's that simple. So there's a change of communication, and there's a lot of people who are just stepping out at the end of 2019 and then all the way during 2020. This year, maybe, I'm not sure. I haven't really seen much of that, but the older generation stepping away, what do you got left? Oh yeah, older generation and the church, what do you have left? YouTube and friends? Probably. Then you've got those who, got your married friends, but I would say for those who are single, take it with a grain of salt, because they're not wrong, but if they're older than 30, like in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, different generation, different problems, different issues, alright? It seems like there's always a different mindset that comes with these different generations too. They want to call the kids that are born in the past 20 years Zoomers. And to a degree, that's very true, because growing up with the internet is very different than those who are in their 50s who never grew up with the internet. It just popped onto the scene back in the 90s. And then the internet popped up and grew probably around 98 to 2000, give or take. I'm trying to think here. Back when they were doing the AOL CD free samplers, when they're trying to advertise for the internet service, I remember that, and I'm a little fuzzy on the details there, but I want to say 98, 99, 96. So basically 97 through 99 is probably when the internet started picking up speed. Anyway, moving on. I am trying to wrap things up now at this point. Different mindset, different issues, different problems, all of that comes.